All right, Tony, we're live, man. I'm excited to chat with you. I love what you're working on.
Great. Thanks for having me here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. You've been working on this business for a while. Restaurant365, as my understanding, is that you set out to, and you built exactly what you set out to do, but a total software package for restaurants, integrating with other software vendors. But as I understand it, you saw that there was a fragmented software market for restaurants. You wanted to pick a specific vertical in going into restaurants, and Restaurant365 is kind of the central hub. Is that approximately the right way to describe it?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Restaurant365 is, you would think of it as a restaurant enterprise management tool in terms of it manages all aspects of the company of restaurants. So we do a lot of things in the store, such as the scheduling and the inventory and the manager log and those details. We also do things at the corporate office for the groups that own multiple locations as well. So accounting, banking, producing financial reports and BI and that type of thing. And then we also do payroll, HR, hiring. For the franchisors, we have a franchising module that helps them work with their franchisees. So very robust tool that works on all of those back of the house and corporate items.
So when I think about the current landscape, and for context too, I started a point of sale company in 2012 to 2014. We ended up selling it to Big Commerce in 2014. We were focused more on retail businesses and building iPad point of sale software, but I got deep enough into it to at least understand the restaurant space and understand point of sale and a bunch of the components that go into the sales process and what companies, retail shops are looking for. When you think of the restaurant space, what are the most important, if you were to say this is number 1, 2, 3 for an average single restaurant location, what are the pieces that they most rely on?
So at a single restaurant location, the things that are most important to them, if you think about it from how is their business succeed, right? That's what I think of first. And there's really 3 factors. You want your sales as high as they can be. You want to control your food cost, and you want to maintain the labor cost properly. And with those 3 factors, you're going to get to what we would call your prime profit. So those are the 3 things that managers try to manage from inside the store. And so you would want tools that can help you manage all 3 of those factors. So a lot of times on the sales side, it's a point of sale tool, right? You have a point of sale software. Maybe it has loyalty included so that you can get customers repeating, coming back. And then on the food cost side, you want something that's going to help you manage your inventory and recommend what you should order based on your recipes and based on projected sales in the next week. Okay, Tuesday by day part, we think for lunch you're going to sell this many burritos. So because of that, you need to buy this many tortillas now so you'll be ready, right? Those type of recommendations to really hone in so you aren't wasting food. And then lastly is the labor management. So you want a tool that will help you manage the employee schedule, have the right amount of people on the clock so that you aren't having people twiddling their thumbs, at 2 o'clock when your restaurant's dead. And so you really try to hone that in. There's really a science to it. You hone in the right schedule, not driving too much overtime for your people either. And then with that, being able to onboard, retain, and pay those employees. And that's becoming a bigger deal because just like a lot of industries, it's really hard to retain your people these days.
Yeah. And just to recap where you guys are, you started the company in 2012, is that right? 2011?
2011, yeah.
2011. And you have about 430 employees, raised about 140 million in venture, is that right?
Yeah, we have done all that. And then we've also done a couple acquisitions, so we raised some money to do some acquisitions as well. And yeah, that's about right. Yeah, coming up on right around 500 employees right now, I think.
When you think about, I'm curious your thoughts on this, back office restaurant, ordering of the food, the distribution of the food to the restaurants. Where is this today, and where do you see it going? Because I could almost see this being like a giant AI distribution automation system, where it's just, you just route, trucks are driverless, the whole system knows where it goes. You plug in on the front end the creative aspect, which is the menu. And then it's like, okay, this is where we should get the food. This is what's in season. This is what the prices are. This is lead times and blah, blah, blah. Are things moving in that direction, or are things kind of stuck in a manual back office process?
Yeah, I think in general they are moving in that direction. I mean, I'm not sure how far in the future you're looking. If it's also self-driving cars and that. Like, yeah, I can see it getting there at some point.
Yeah.
But it is definitely making its way to more automated recommendations of what you're going to purchase. So, for example, in our tool, the most important part, it's all driven by the right forecast. So you've got to be able to forecast your sales in the coming, say, week or days. Because once you have that forecast, then you can start to predict how much you need to order of ingredients. So you have a forecast, your recipes, what you've been selling in the past, then you've got the ingredients, and that's really where you're going to start ordering, right? So you then have recommendations on what you should order. And we're there today. Those things happen, and the manager could just choose yes, and then it automatically orders all those, and we interface with hundreds of vendors. So then you send the orders to the vendors, they receive it, they fulfill it, send it back to the store, and then in most cases, electronically, we then ingest into our system that the delivery happened and the invoice that they're going to owe. And then we also have a payments module where we can pay on the store's behalf once they approve it. It goes through a little workflow, and they say, yes, pay this, we did receive it. And then we can pay it. So a lot of that is pretty automated today, in fact.
Yeah, that's great. How predictable, or how do you understand the landscape of predicting food? Because when I think of from my simple perspective of someone who just goes to restaurants, I'm amazed that they have all the items on the menu that they do, knowing that a lot of these are perishable within a day or a few days. Is there a real, how accurate can restaurants get in predicting what people are going to order and how many people are going to come in the door? Yeah, how do they do that?
It's interesting. You have some flux, of course, right? Maybe there's some bachelor party and a big crew of guys comes in at 10 p.m. that you usually don't get, right? Just before closing time. But for the most part, it's fairly predictable. So you can look at what they do. And the key for restaurants is the day of the week. So, for example, they could, in some stores, Tuesday is their lowest sales day of the week. And then that's generally going to be the case every single Tuesday, right? And Wednesday's going to be slightly better. Thursday's better. Friday's better. Saturday's killer. It's great for them. Sunday drops back down to like a Friday level, and then Monday drops off, and Monday and Tuesday are low. That at some restaurants, that's the norm, and it's always what happens to them. And so because of that, then you look at, okay, my sales always hover around these levels. And then in terms of menu items, while you can't predict exactly what someone's going to order, you can look and say, for every $1,000 of sales that we have, on average, we sell 25 burritos, we sell 30 salads, and you start to list those out, and that's fairly predictable.
Yeah, it seems like this is the science of statistics, really, which is you can't predict when any individual is what they're gonna order, or when they're gonna die, or whether they're gonna have kids, but across a population, it's amazingly precise. You kind of know on average what it's going to be pretty consistently. So that's kind of interesting. Are there other things on the restaurant, either back office side, managing employees, the food choices? Like, are there things that you think other people don't appreciate about restaurants from a person who just goes to the restaurant and doesn't, see?
One that really stands out to me is the people that work in restaurants are there serving you, like they're hospitality people, but sometimes I think some people go to a restaurant and treat the people that work there like they're a commodity, like this is just someone or something that's getting me my food, right? And the food is the thing I care about. But something that people don't appreciate always these are all real people who love and care, and the restaurant business is run like other businesses where they need to motivate these people and they care for them, and some of them get bonused. And a lot of people just don't appreciate the personal side of what goes into preparing and serving food, because they're so focused on how good is my food? How good does it look? That's the only thing they're caring about. So yeah, I love that part of our focus as a business is around the people side and people management, and the fact that like a restaurant needs a culture for their people. Like what's their culture for their employees and how they treat them and how they try to retain them. And because so many people for so long have thought of a restaurant job as a temporary job, right?
Yeah.
That's whatever, that's high school kids. And no, this can be a real career, and restaurants can drive a good culture and keep people. And when you do, then everyone has a better experience with the product, right? And so that's something I think people don't always appreciate.
Yeah. I was at a restaurant a few months ago in Portland, Oregon, and they had these robot server, just like basically a circular robot. So they put the tray on top, deliver you the food, scan the menu, order what you want. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Then I noticed that there's waitresses and waiters just in the restaurant like everyone else. And there's just as many waiters in restaurants as there would be in a normal restaurant. And the robots, they come out, they bring the food to you, but then the waiter comes off and takes the food off the tray, puts it on your table and docks you. So it felt like, I was like, where is this going to go? Is this going to be, is there going to be a bifurcation or splitting where there's restaurants that just purely serve food, almost just like, order through the machine brings it out, and there's maybe one person managing the whole restaurant. And then there's other restaurants that have the full experience, just like you classically would. Do you see any trend towards robotics and AI and machines being the interface that people are looking for or are getting in restaurants? Or is that a really
I think that there always will be more adoption of automation, right? Can someone just order right on their phone and instead of talking to someone, even if they're sitting at a table in the restaurant? Yes. And that does happen more because it was adopted so heavily during COVID, right? But there's also a factor of sociality. People want that in the restaurants. One of the ways that we saw that very clearly during COVID is when COVID hit, dine-in dropped all the way off, right? Where it was the majority of restaurant service was dine-in, and takeout was down here and deliveries down there. When COVID hit, takeout and delivery came up, dine-in dropped off a cliff, mainly because they were closed. You couldn't dine in at most places. And the interesting part is that as states would lift restrictions and people were allowed to come back in, or at least build patios, and people were allowed to go eat outside, dine-in would surge up every single time in those states when those changes were made. And I think it showed very clearly that people still want that experience part of the restaurant. They don't just want the food. And so, yes, there is a heavier adoption of, say, online ordering or delivery or that than there was 3 years ago, but it's still nowhere near the level that dine-in has come back to now. Over the last 2 years, it's then recovered. And dine-in is still very high because I think people like that experience side of it. Yeah. And I think that restaurants will have to get more and more creative about providing the right experience for people now that we're coming to a post-pandemic era. Yeah.
I mean, if I think about it, where else am I eating this food? I'm either taking it back to my car, sitting in my car, or going back to my house, which many people will order out just to get out of the house and be somewhere in a different setting. Yeah.
Right. You want to go out and see something new, and maybe you say hi to a few people, or you see other people interacting. All that's positive. And then maybe just to hit the other side of your question, which was about, do I think servers might be replaced with robots or that kind of thing? I do think restaurants will continue to adopt technology that makes them more efficient. But in general, I don't think the goal is a robot apocalypse. I don't think it's to wipe people out. I view it more like a movie I saw where a guy put a robotic thing on his arm and it made him more effective. I view it more like that. Like they're putting on a technology backpack onto these people that makes them better, right? And so that's what I think they would use the automation more for than just to replace people altogether or get them out of there. I think it's just, how could your people get rid of some of the more mundane tasks so that your people can do more human things? They can interact with people. They can help the experience be better instead of saying to get them out of the restaurant, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, have you seen restaurants? I would imagine in the restaurant business, there is a Pareto distribution of revenue. Some restaurants, the vast majority of restaurants kind of just get by, and then a few absolutely crush it. If that's true, what do you see in those that absolutely crush it? Is it a unique cuisine that they're offering, a location, some other aspect of it that's nuanced that most people don't appreciate? I'm curious what makes restaurants, like a celebrity chef, I think of sometimes might be a reason why someone goes to a restaurant.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple ways you could gauge success. So one of those is, does a restaurant have high sales? Right. So some people just say that restaurant's so popular. There's people in it all the time. Right. And you may look at an individual restaurant and their sales are off the charts. You know, they're doing $8-10 million a year in sales at one store. If you want some example, like to think about it in context, the average Burger King does about $1.5 million a year in sales. The average McDonald's does close to $3 million a year in sales. Wow. And the average Chick-fil-A is well above that. So Chick-fil-A is kind of the gold standard of these fast food restaurants in terms of driving up your sales. So that's one way you could think about it. And when it comes to that, it's either the brand or concept that's really driving it, or it's the location, right? Location can be another huge factor. But that's not necessarily the real driver of success for restaurants, because if you're running a bad business, you can do $4 million a year in sales and lose money, right? And maybe you paying for that location and it's ultra expensive, right? And so because of that, the better way to manage a restaurant's effectiveness is the bottom line. You know, are they making 10% profit? That's a good number. If you're making 10% profit, that's great. If you're making 5%, hey, you're in there, you are making some money. And then, of course, driving up your sales higher, 5% means more if you have more sales. But then a lot of restaurants are down around that zero level of profitability, and some are negative. And so that's another way to gauge their effectiveness, which I think is a better way. And most of the difference I see in those stores that turn a profit or not is, do they have a culture of data? Do they care about data? Do they look at how their restaurant is happening? Or are they just someone who likes serving food to people, right? And runs a store. When that happens, a lot of times you don't have that business sense. And then even if you drive your sales up and your recipe is so tasty, you have an unsuccessful brand, you have to close your door at some point. So
that's interesting. Although it makes sense to me. I could see how a lot of people starting restaurants, because restaurants aren't a scalable business model, generally speaking, unless you set out with the intention to scale it. You can almost tell whether a restaurant has intention to scale by the branding and the experience of the restaurant. Do you feel that there is some, like, what is it about some restaurants like Chipotle, or, I mean, you said McDonald's, the fast food model seems to have been, when did that happen? The 60s, the 70s, 80s? That was really the explosion of the fast food model. Burger King, McDonald's. The first drive-through was
1971 at Wendy's, I believe.
Huh.
Like the first Wendy's, real drive-through where you come in and make your order at this box, and then you drive to the next window and they give it to you. But you're right. That's the time when they came in.
And it seems like that explosion of business potential happened because they were able to systematically build a business, so they can reproduce the model very efficiently. Their cost for building, their cost for real estate development probably was much, much lower because they were more efficient at it. Their sourcing of the food was probably lower. The experience was more consistent, so people knew whether they're in California or Oregon or Nevada, anywhere you go, it's going to be the same. So Starbucks benefits from that. All retail chains benefit from that similarity. Are there other takeaways that you think led to the success of the retail chains?
Yeah. One way to think about the restaurant industry in America is by location count, right? So each concept, each brand, how many locations do they have? Because that's one way to really measure their success. And half the restaurants in America are single units. So that, it's like you said before, that speaks to the fact that the restaurant business is hard to repeat. People have made success of it, like these brands you've mentioned, but for the most part, it's very difficult. Half the restaurants in America are just single unit spots that never expanded to multiple locations.
Let me ask you this. How many of those single unit spots do you think had or have the intention to expand? So they said, let's open up one, then let's open up 2 and 3 and 4 and 10 and 100 versus, hey, I have no intention from the start to open up more than one. How many have tried to open up chains and not worked out, do you think?
Yeah. I don't think a lot of them have say, tried, but how many would like to is almost all of them. Because with the margins that I mentioned before, a single restaurant is not making anybody rich, right? It just is not. And so owning a restaurant is more for the love of owning it and serving people and making a living. But if you're really looking to take it to another level, you have to open up multiple locations. That's always the answer if they're trying to grow what they're doing. And so I think because of that, most restaurateurs would love to have more locations, but it is a specific effort and you have to have the capital and it takes some business acumen to do it. That's how I look at that.
Yeah. What's working now? I think of fairly recent retail restaurant chains is like Chipotle. I think Chipotle tried to open up a new one. The Asian, I forget what it was called. They had an Asian specific Chipotle brand, Thai House maybe. Are there some chains that are just on a tear right now that are really working?
Yeah, one concept that you see is fried chicken. Fried chicken has been killing it for the last couple of years. I mean, just above and beyond anything else.
Like
fried
KFC
chicken is killing it. So you're talking like right now the hotter, newer brands are Dave's Hot Chicken is one that's just on a crazy tear. I don't know if you have them up in Portland yet, but they are expanding at probably the most rapid pace in America. And they're one of our customers, and it's so fun to see these guys exploding in just a matter of a couple of years. So fried chicken is one. There's tons of brands that have been seeing incredible growth lately in that vein. So, like of course, some of the most successful are like Chick-fil-A, but then newer and up and coming groups like Raising Cane's and Dave's Hot Chicken, even Zaxby's has had some expansion out in the Southeast as well. There have been a lot of successful fried chicken groups. If you look back at, let's say, like go 8 years ago, the explosion was in the make your own pizza, where you would go through the line and pick your toppings. They cook it in a minute and a half. And that really exploded a while back. Right now, it's fried chicken. Wingstop's doing well. There's tons of these groups.
How about the trend on the quality of the food? Certainly, it feels like the traditional fast food restaurants, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, etc., generally have a reputation for serving low quality, very inexpensive food. Do you see that changing, where the quality is gone up or the price points have gone up per item, or is that not really the case?
I think they have had to raise their quality because the fastest growing segment in America has been the fast casual segment, right? So you've got fine dining up at the top with the white tablecloths. You've got family dining, your Chili's, Olive Garden, Outbacks of the world. And then you've got fast casual, and really distinguishing fast casual from fine dining is that you usually walk up to the counter and order it. You go sit down, they bring you your food, and it's a higher quality food, maybe a higher price point than fast food. Usually the fast casual stores, they don't have a drive-through, and fast casual as a segment has just been exploding. And so quick serve, or fast food you might call it, that usually has a drive-through and is perceived as the lower quality and usually a lower price point, has had to come up a little bit because of the success of the fast casual stores. Yeah,
it's interesting. I think it's such an important threshold or an important window to see restaurants, because the food, one relationship I've been really interested in recently is the relationship between food and health. And I learned recently that in 1918, the ratio of your average household income was 18% was spent on food and 6% was spent on healthcare. And I think today that's flipped. So roughly 18% is spent on healthcare, 6% is spent on food. And I wonder if those are related. So as the quality of the food goes down, you spend more on healthcare. People are more obese. They have issues in their health and expenditures that are related to the food. And I think about what would drive that the other direction. How can we make food healthy again? And are people willing to spend or recognize that as a problem? So I don't know if you have a reaction to that, but I've been thinking about that.
I think my reaction to that is I don't know if it's as much over 100-year span, the quality of the food or the quantity of the food. So I don't know a lot of times if we point at certain ingredients and really say this ingredient is making everyone overweight. It's usually that you're eating more of it, right? And it's about the calorie intake for the most part. And so if you look back, let's say 150 years when they were just inventing fertilizer, right? Imagine before fertilizer, the world was a totally different place and food was scarce and it was hard to grow on your own. They invented fertilizer, and it changed the world. I know it's a funny topic, right? That's not something people talk about. Yeah. But I actually think that the invention of fertilizer is probably the single biggest change that's technological advancement that's happened in the world. So that's where you see the population of the world before was always creeping along. You know, it was in the hundreds of millions. Invention of fertilizer came along, and it was like 1 billion, 3 billion, 5 billion. We're coming up on 8 billion people now, all within 1 century. We've seen that change, and compared to the whole history of humankind. So that's where I think what that did was made food not as scarce anymore, and you have high quantities, and so it makes it cheaper. So more people can buy more of it, and then they are, of course, putting things in to make it taste great. And so people are overeating on this, and I actually think that's the biggest factor.
Yeah. So why is that? Do you think that there's not as much satiating food, generally speaking, that it doesn't, that previously there would be because I can't imagine everyone would do that. I think it just tastes better. Can you imagine growing your own food 150 years ago and then cooking it and eating it in your house? Maybe it's a log cabin. I mean, I don't know. Imagine that, and just imagine how it might taste versus imagine going to one of your favorite restaurants and how it tastes and what they've done. Were you going to do that stuff to it back then? No. So were you going to crave it? I just sure wish I could have some plain potatoes and beef right now. Probably not. Yeah. But it totally changed when you're going to these places that are all just in the business of making food as good as possible. Then you crave it. Yeah. Have you heard any negative externalities on fertilizer? Any unforeseen negative consequences that are sort of becoming more obvious as time has gone on? Because I imagine
I haven't.
Really? Yeah.
But there's a book out there you could read. It's super interesting on the history of fertilizer. I know it's the funniest plug, but The Alchemy of Air is what it's called. Ooh. It's about the guy that invented fertilizer, and it talks about the history where before that they were harvesting bat guano off the islands of South America and bringing it back to Europe to grow food because it had been found to be a magical substance. But they were only able to do that for 50 years, and they used it all. And so then they were desperate because all of a sudden when they found that, they were able to produce food way faster and people got dependent on it. And then they ran out of it. And so then, they had to figure out a solution. And that's where they came up with the man-made fertilizer.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I've heard some people talk about the quality of the soil being a real concern. The Dust Bowl is a commonly referred to term that references the dust in the middle of the United States where there used to be a lot of fertile soil. And I think a lot of that is a result of the farming technique of monocrop farming, where previously in the natural setting, you'd have a lot of biodiversity. And through that, you have animals and different kind of plants, and that would create a rich ecosystem in the soil. And when it's all, miles of the same crop, there's that lack of biodiversity. And so it's not a regenerative soil. And so over, time, that starts to degrade into just dust, which is not, you don't get the same yields. You eventually start to degrade. There, as a side note, and I want to ask you about that, there's a great documentary called The Biggest Little Farm, which introduces this concept. It was this couple in LA that started a farm outside of LA, and that you should actually go visit. They they planted like 60 different kinds of trees and vegetables, and they had pigs and they had, all the things you think of in a quintessential farm. And they were able to make it extremely profitable. They harvested different fruits and vegetables at different times of the year. People paid more. It was a premium product for sure. And they always had problems. Like they would have the snail infestation come in and eat a bunch of stuff, but then they brought in ducks, and the ducks came in and ate the snails. And the moral of the story was that in this rich biodiversity, you're always off balance, but you're falling forward. There's like, oh, we got this problem, but then we got a overabundance of ducks. They're eating all the snails, and now they're eating other things. Well, then an owl comes in, or then the hawk comes in, and it keeps the duck population down. And it's pretty beautiful to me because it represented this, what I view as a natural system of biodiversity and richness in food production. So
that sounds pretty interesting. Yeah, I'd love to check that out.
Yeah. It does seem like there is I don't know if you'd agree with this, but there seems to be an urgency on the mechanism for food production, that monocrop farming. I would say, to me, it seems like there's two elements to this. One is the destruction of natural land or rainforests or places that we highly value for biodiversity to put in farms. That's one problem that you obviously can't do forever, and we've done a lot of. And then there's also the yield from the farms itself. So I don't know.
Farm yields have exploded over the last 25 years, like producing 100-fold of what they used to produce in a lot of places because of the introduction of technology, where because it can be a problem if it goes unchecked. But I think a lot of farmers now, and I'm not expert enough, I'm definitely not speaking from full expertise here, but I have spoken to some farmers about it, where a lot of farmers now use a lot of technology to know, well, they take samples of their field in all different spots, and then they go around, they have GPS set up, and they're dropping different things in the soil to enrich it in different parts of their field. Like, it's not even the same for the whole field. And then they grow different crops at different times of the year to replace what one crop takes and put it back with a different type of crop. So I know there's been a lot of effort there, and I have talked to some farmers who have actually seen a huge increase in their production over the last number of years. A lot with not wasting water, because they've installed these drip lines underneath the roots, and it just delivers water directly to the roots instead of spraying it out, and that avoids weeds. And anyway, it's been very interesting. There's a lot that goes on. But again, like I said, I'm not expert enough to really take us down that road. But it is an interesting topic.
Does the business?
But I do think like in general, if you were just to say, I think we should get back to a simpler time or how people did things, say 150 years ago. I would say we could, but you have to accept the world's population of under 1 billion people or 1 billion people, because that level of function can't sustain an 8 billion person population or growing to 10. That's the part that it has to give on one side or the other, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So per square mile, we're maximizing the productivity of the farmlands.
You've got to produce enough to sustain people, or you need to have less people, right? Something there would have to happen.
Yeah. Producing less food and moving the population down doesn't seem like a feasible approach.
That's probably not the answer. Yeah.
It'd have to be high enough yields per square mile. Does the business retail Restaurant365 go? How far back in that direction towards the food production does it go? Is it just restaurants enter in your vendor, and then you have email or contact method for the vendor, and you just hit them with that? You're not building software for vendors, right?
No. Yeah, we don't do the vendor or the manufacturer side. We're on the restaurant side, so we're just all about what food they need and getting it to them the best way, right? That's the part that we do in that relationship.
So with 400 plus people, are you thinking about expanding? Is that the natural course of the business, to expand in the different directions, like move on the front end more towards restaurant advertising or marketing tools, and then the back end towards food supply chain, or does that not make as much sense?
We're always building new products and enriching our products. Like the more recent product releases we've had are around payroll and HR and applicant tracking and hiring and employee retention. More investment on those sides. And so then once we've brought those fully to bear, we will continue to invest in other areas. So yeah, my biggest fear in business is stagnation. So we're never going to sit still. We'll always be building something. I think we'll generally, though, continue to target directly to the restaurants themselves and what will help them the most, because the industry is so big. Even in America, there's at least 650,000 restaurants and growing.
Wow.
Because they're recovering from how many had to shut down during COVID. We used to have over 700,000. And so with that type of growth, our company can continue to serve those restaurants and have a long road ahead of us without really needing to venture out into adjacent type of companies for quite some time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then you guys are centrally located. Is there offices that you have, or have you gone completely remote and distributed?
Yeah, during COVID, we were remote for about a year and a half. We have offices. I'm sitting in one of our offices. I'm one of, let's say, 12 people in here today, in an office that could see 200 people.
Wow.
And so basically what we've decided as things open back up, we just said our people were very productive no matter where they're working, right? We're providing technology so people can log in and do that from most anywhere. And so we just made it optional. If people want to come into the office, it's open. We'd love to see you sometimes. And I think there's benefits to seeing people, right? There's a culture benefit when you're talking to people face to face that you don't necessarily get over Zoom or a video. And there's also, for new hires, a training element. They learn better when they can turn to someone and ask them a question versus the more formal reaching out and saying, can we schedule a time to chat online? So we've seen those benefits of being together, but at the same time, we see productivity and people saving on drive time, right?
Yeah.
And people just being happy in their homes. And so we haven't forced anyone to come back. And so because of that, we have different people that cycle in and out. I actually love to come into the office every day because it separates that work and life balance. I like to not feel like I'm working at my house all the time. I like there to be a bit of separation. These are two different parts of my life. Otherwise, I find myself always working, right?
Yeah.
I could be, and I don't want to be always working.
Yeah.
That helps me to strike a balance by coming in. But I know for everyone that's not the case. So we've just been super flexible in our business.
Yeah. I wonder about commercial real estate and the direction that it goes. Because clearly having a 200-person office with 12 people on average is not sustainable. And you're not unique, right? You're the average company that has, some companies have 1,000-person offices with a couple people, maybe 100 people circulating in and out. They're pseudo in office, especially if they have had a very location specific company previously. And I wonder where that goes. Does commercial real estate transform into retail and restaurants and then makes for a more rich walking density of cities, or the other way around where they just get torn down and eventually there's just a widespread? It's almost like the reverse of the industrial revolution where everyone came into cities to be productive, and now people are leaving to be able to afford real estate houses. I don't know if you thought about that, but I wonder what the trend is or how that will shake out.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I mean, one way you could look at that is just in our company's data. Pre-COVID, 15% of our workforce didn't live near one of our offices, because we have an office here. We have a similar sized office in Austin, Texas. We have an office in Palestine, overseas, and we also have some people in Vietnam. And so looking at that, and we have an office up in Northern California that's very small also. So I guess we have a lot of office space, but they're all in long-term leases. And so it's we've got them either way. So for right now, you're not getting out of them, so we've got the office available. But long term, what would we do? I mean, I would love to be paying less for office space if I could, based on the amount of people who are coming in. So for us, anecdotally, yeah, I could definitely see a reduction in office space usage. But like I said, on our people, 15% of them did not live near an office pre-COVID. Now that number's more like 35% of our workforce doesn't live near an office. A lot of people moved out and about during COVID and moved away. And that was very common for us because they no longer needed to be near that home base, and things were more affordable elsewhere. And so, yeah, I've definitely firsthand seen that trend taking place.
Yeah. Because I wonder, as that happens, right, as people move away from dense cities to more rural areas, does that mean that restaurants are affected either in the fact that location is not as important? You don't need to be in the center of a city because there's not as much foot traffic. You can be located elsewhere. There's also, it seems like this is not super new, but people find restaurants online. Like, I mean, I would imagine majority of people are on Google Maps or Yelp, where that's their initial recommendation into the restaurant that they want to try. Do you see either maybe a slowing down of restaurants, or restaurants are located farther away from city centers, or some other impact of remote work?
Yeah, I think the one thing you'll see is restaurants always trying to be where the people are.
Yeah.
Right? Because even if they find them online, or if they're going to order delivery, you still need the food to arrive while it's hot and tasty. So location is always going to matter with food production. But it may not be the exact same locations that were valuable before. I mean, obviously, there's full restaurant, strip malls that have gone basically dormant because they were built around work campuses.
Yeah.
And now no one's at that work campus. And so these aren't places that people were going to eat on a Friday and Saturday night. They were making their money at lunchtime on weekdays. And those groups that were doing that are having a hard time right now. So you are seeing a shift in some of that.
Yeah. What do you think about that? I mean, is that just a like a micro depression that happens where part of the economy slows down, transitions, those buildings remain empty? Or is there sometimes I think when something dies, there's something else that could be reborn in its place. And it would seem like if you had a business that could accommodate to commercial real estate or the spaces in restaurants, like you can all of a sudden make something completely new in it. But it's not obvious to me what that is or how it looks like.
The thing that I'm most curious to keep watching is the future of malls, right? That's a space that I think has been impacted the most. Remember, you think 20 years ago, the mall was cool, right?
Yeah.
Like you go to the mall and that's where you hang out. That's generally not the case these days. And so a lot of these big indoor, now you're seeing more outdoor shopping areas that have walking, maybe they have a water feature and a bridge, and they've got all these different things, very different than the old huge indoor mall, right? And so you're even seeing now some repurposing of that, where some of the big stores in the malls are becoming gyms, or they're more based around experiences. They're like VR centers or trampoline, bounce houses. And they're doing all these things with them that are more, what I'm seeing is more based around experiences that people could have. And very different than when they just go and do a whole bunch of retail shopping, because people are doing a lot of their retail shopping online at Amazon and different places. And that's really changed where you're buying clothes and how that works. So you have seen some of that repurposing, but I'm really curious to see how that unfolds.
Yeah. Even if you open up a retail chain, it has to be similar to restaurants, right? There's this relationship between, am I going for the product or am I going for the experience? And I would imagine in restaurants is the same as retail. If you can sell an amazing experience, then your margins are going to be higher. You're going to have a much greater thriving business, because the experience, often I feel like the experience is a story, and the story doesn't have, you're not competing on the same level. If you tell a story, you come in and all the way, like, what's the shop? Dave and Buster's. You have a unique thing, whether it's games, whether it's comedy, whatever the thing is, whether it's an adventure or a thrill, whatever the thing is, that doesn't have the same marginal costs as competing on food or competing on location. It's like, that's very competitive. But if you can offer a really unique experience, whether you're in retail or whether you're in restaurants, it's like, that's what people would drive 45 minutes for and want to go to experience. Like, hence Disneyland in Disney World. It's like, you're not going there for the food. What are you going there for? That's kind of an exciting future too, right? It's like,
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you love people competing to give you a better experience?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that seems awesome.
Yeah, totally. And if you want food, or you just straight up want food, or you want products, like you have the internet, and that's amazing. Amazon will deliver to your house right away, or DoorDash, or whatever else.
Yeah. Yep.
I wanted to ask you, Tony, when you started the business back then, the internet was much different. There wasn't, Uber wasn't around. A lot of mainstream tech products now weren't around. Did you build out the first version technically, or how did you start cracking at the code and deploying the first versions of the software to get off the ground?
Yeah. Yeah. So we started the business. It was me and two other co-founders named Morgan Harris and John Moody. The three of us started it, and those guys were very strong on the sales and marketing background. And so they worked on that side of the business. And then there was another guy with me named Matt Popes, who's a talented developer. And Matt and I were developing the first version of it. And, over time, as we grew, we brought more people on to help out and work together. But yeah, that was how we initially did it, was Matt and I just laying down code and getting a product into people's hands as fast as possible. And it was pretty fun because we weren't necessarily what you would call restaurant people, but we were technology people, and we were business minded on technology and thinking about how to we were passionate about solving problems for people with technology. And so that's what we set out to do for the restaurant industry. And so we would go down to these restaurants at night, wait for them to close, and we would help them count their inventory just to see what the process was like and what was painful about it. And then we'd go back to the office the next day and design something and write it and get it into their hands of our first few beta customers and get their feedback on it, right? And it was very iterative early on, and that was how we created it.
So what was the first version? Were you building like inventory tracking was the first thing you sold, or how did you enter the market?
Nope. The very first thing for us, we had a vision of like a 2-year vision of the product growing and expanding, but it takes time. So you want to come out with things of value right off the bat and then grow it from there. So the first thing we had that added value was pulling data from their point of sale. And this is groups who had more than one location. You pull the data from all their locations and then produce a report at the end of the day that shows the owners of the restaurant how all the locations compare to each other. And you tried to flag some things like, hey, here's how many meal voids they have, and start to flag some of the exceptions that might mean they're running inefficiently, or that someone might be stealing from you, that type of thing. And so that was the early on. We were just giving them daily sales and performance reporting across all their locations in one spot. We called it the flash report. And then from there, we started to build on more of the accounting mechanisms of it, where they could pay their vendors smoothly and manage their banking better and things like that. But yeah, that was the very first problem.
Yeah, I like that initial entry, because you're providing something that's unique and valuable, but you're not competing where there's other software vendors in the space. Like, you're not starting off by building a QuickBooks competitor or a hot schedules or shift management system where there's probably other players in the space. You show them things that are actionable and useful right off the bat, which it's a good philosophy to have. A lot of companies will get tripped up early on in that.
No, we were really passionate to find product market fit. That's what we were trying to solve a problem that people have. And for me, that's what product market fit means, right? Is that you're solving a problem someone has so well that they want to pay you for it. And so we really wanted to find that proper product market fit of what was needed and what was lacking. And part of it was being very cloud-based. A lot of solutions then weren't as cloud-based. And so that was a factor of it as well. And so, as we started doing that, we self-funded the first 7 years. So we didn't have a mountain of money to go compete against the really established companies doing something. So we wanted to pave our own way and create our own thing. And one of the most unique things that came out of it over 2 years was a full accounting platform that was restaurant specific. We have an accounting tool similar to NetSuite and Intact and some of the bigger accounting products out there, but we only sell it to restaurants, and everything we do in it is made to make restaurants more efficient, and it's fully cloud-based, and all of those things together was really unique at the time that we came out with that.
You didn't raise money for 7 years. Was it for did you try, or did you consciously say we're not going to try?
Yeah. We made a plan from the start where we understood we would put in our own money and grow at, the gradual pace and really nail product market fit. And I remember we had a spreadsheet early on, and we made it, and it showed that we were going to have to put in money. It showed our money going down for a long time. This line, this is our money going down. But then it also finally had it, kind of bottom out and then start to come back up. And we saw that as a 5-year journey, to really run that loop. And that's basically how it happened. But we understood from the start that's what it would look like. But we wanted to really make a successful, solid business, and that's how we did it. And so then finally, when we got to the start of 2018, it made sense to do a minority investment round, and we did it with Bessemer. And then we put more into our go-to-market and a bit more aggressive on growth. And then from there, we've done other rounds and with some real world-class investors that I'm very happy we're working with now. But I'm really glad with the path that we took on it. Could we have grown a little faster had I taken money sooner? Sure. But I'm actually very pleased with the company we've become, with the way that we understand our business and all of the levers you can pull to make it profitable or grow faster and all these different things. And I think that the way we came up in those first 7 years is what's contributed to a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, the obvious benefit is you likely own more of the company, have more control of the company at a stage where most founders would have, you get diluted, 25% every round. So typical dilution, if you're a founder, especially with 3 founders, assuming you guys split it 30% equally, have 10% for a employee option pool, you raise 1 round, seed round, you're down to, 25, 23, 22%. 3 rounds into it, you're down at like single digits. And you ask yourself, 5 years into this, I've busted myself to get here, and I own 7% of the company. And then you look to an IPO, and it's like 2%, 3%. And I can see now that having gone through the difficulty, I'm sure, having 3, 4, or 5 years of either no income or very little income is stressful. But it's awesome to hear that
it's a slog, but it's also engaging, right? Like you're just in this new thing, you feel scrappy and you're just like all in on it. Yeah, that's how we felt. So I actually always try to help our workforce. We're bigger and we're well funded and definitely have a reputation out there now. But I always try to help our workforce continue some of that feeling. Like, in what way is it day one today? In what way are we just getting started? And we're always trying to think about that, because I think that's important to continually be hungry, feel a bit of that in the business, feel urgency.
Yeah, totally, man. Well, congrats on everything you guys have built. I love it. It's a unique story because you guys have gone through that first 7 years, no funding. So I think you're like a combination of a bootstrap business and then also a venture funded business, which is a nice combination. Do you see the trajectory as just being IPO or stay private or acquisition or just TBD?
Yeah, the way I think about it is over the next couple of years, I want to be IPO ready.
Yeah.
And I say ready because it's not IPO or bust. We don't have to, but I'd love to be ready for it, because then all options are available. You can continue running a really effective business. You could IPO if you want. There's just all options are on the table when that's the case. Whereas if you don't drive yourself to be IPO ready and have some of those controls and mechanisms in place, you're not a mature enough business, then your options are really limited at that point. So.
Is the primary thing to do there to be IPO ready is on the accounting side, having all the accounting, reporting? Is that what you refer to, what you think of when you think of IPO ready?
No, there's all aspects, right? You need to be in scale. You need to be the right size. You need to have the right growth pace. You need to have the right retention, net and gross. You need the right margins. You need the right accounting controls in place. You need to have passed the right audits. You need to have the right people and the right leadership team that could lead a public company. It's all aspects of the business. Really.
Yeah. Wish you the best, man. I'm sure you guys will tear it up, especially as the restaurant industry continues to grow. Are you just in the U.S.? I was going to ask you that. Or are you abroad as well in other countries?
Yeah, we primarily target U.S. only. We do have some customers in other countries, but we don't target there. We target the U.S.
That's to me, I think of is there a reason for that? Is it the needs of U.S. customers are different, or time zones, or some or just the U.S. market's so big you haven't even gotten out of the U.S. yet?
Yeah, it's more that of what I mentioned earlier. The U.S. market is so big. There's a lot of room to run for us here in America. And it is easier to target your go-to-market focus in a certain area because it is a little bit different to sell in different countries.
Yeah.
And the language is different. Yeah. And there's some features they would want different in the product. And all that's okay. That can come over time. But right now, we can still heavily focus in the U.S. and still have a ton of growth.
Yeah. Sweet, man. All right, I'll let you run. Yeah. Are you writing or blogging or anything you want to throw out on the personal side? I know the restaurant365.com. I'm sure you guys have all the socials out there, but anything you want to throw out on the personal side? You tweeting?
No, I don't think so on the personal. I love all the focus going back into the business and our great people here. So yeah, I would just say restaurant365.com is the place to go.
Sweet, man. Thanks so much for your time. It was fun to meet you, Tony.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks.